Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages. My name is Gabor Zinner, and on behalf of the presenters and organizers of Speaker's Corner, I would like to welcome you to today's session. For those of you who have not previously been here, Speaker's Corner is intended to be a fresh air experience, offering Calgarians an opportunity to engage in discussion about topical issues of the day. It draws its inspiration from Hyde Park in London, England, where the format was established and nurtured over the past 165 years. Also, to plagiarize the mission statement of the CBC, Speaker's Corner wants to inform, enlighten, and entertain. Typically, we invite speakers with some knowledge and passion about a topic to debate the stated question for the day, after which anyone who wishes to comment, criticize, amplify, or seek clarification can step up to the microphone to weigh in. Today you will hear from 4 exceptionally well-informed speakers debate a topic which is especially significant to me. You see, once in a while there emerges a new big idea in the realm of social policy with significant impact on the lives of Canadians. One such idea, now accepted as a cornerstone of Canadian society, was the introduction of universal access to Medicare for all Canadians. It was no doubt controversial when first introduced. Today, some urge that the government should pay a monthly guaranteed income to all Canadians. Hence, the resolution for today, for debate rather, will be it resolved that the Government of Canada take responsibility for providing a guaranteed minimum monthly income to all adult Canadians in order to eliminate poverty and to raise the quality of life. Today's session will be led and moderated by Corinne Addison, who dedicated considerable time and effort in researching the topic and finding 4 stellar speakers who will be introduced by Corinne. Corinne is currently pursuing her master's degree in communications at the University of Calgary, and she has a particular interest in public policy. I would like to thank both Corinne and the speakers in advance of the session for taking time from their undoubtedly busy lives to attend here today and to thereby contribute to the quality of civic life in Calgary by addressing this most vital of topics. I would also like to acknowledge some of the organizers who contribute regularly behind the scenes, without whose input the program would have been stillborn. They include Dr. Aaliyah Bailey, right over there, our dedicated lead organizer. They include Mohammed Hassanin, who videographs and archives on YouTube all of the sessions that he can attend. They include Steve Elliott, who at least today did all the heavy lifting by transporting and helping set up our audio equipment. Donna Clark and Tavis Ford, who are not here today, make input into the planning committee, in addition to bringing and removing chairs. And of course, there are the good folks at the Calgary Leadership Forum, including Brian Lee, Bruce Lee, and Dolores Pilsel. Without the effort and input of these folks, Speaker's Corner would not function, or at least not in the way we know it. Without any further ado, please help me welcome Corinne Addison to kick off today's session by introducing the speakers and by moderating the debate. Corinne?
Thank you, Gabor. And thanks for everybody who showed up today. It's going to be a really, really interesting discussion. I'm so excited to hear what all of these speakers have to say. I'd like to get this started. We're going to be starting off with Dr. John Ruck. Dr. John Ruck is the director of the Canadian Poverty Institute at Ambrose University College and is the former president and CEO of the Calgary Homeless Foundation. Over the past 8 years, Dr. Ruck has led nonprofit agencies working on the front lines to provide housing and support to those at risk of and experiencing homelessness. Dr. Ruck was the Chief Executive Officer of Potential Place and the Co-Executive Director of the Alex Community Health Center. From 2004 to 2010, Dr. Ruck was the Chief Executive Officer of the Salvation Army Community Services. Dr. Ruck has also more than 15 years of teaching experience at universities and colleges across Canada. He's been an adjunct faculty member of the University of Calgary since 2008 and an associate professor at McMaster University, and has also taught at Booth University College and Ambrose University College. So please help me give a hand to Dr. Rook, and let's start this off.
Are you okay if we sit? Yes? Okay, our call. You can stand if you want. Lynn wants a present, so it's good to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Gabor and Corinne. It's an interesting topic for sure. I was talking with my 11-year-old about this. I have an 11-year-old, believe it or not. I have a 38-year-old as well. But my 11-year-old and I were playing Monopoly, and guess what he said? Dad, this is just like basic income. Every time I go past go, I get $200, and I don't have to do anything to get it. And then he discovered also, as we were playing Monopoly, that the only time he didn't get his $200 was when he was stuck in jail, because you can't move. The other thing he noticed as an 11-year-old, who's not an economist yet, he discovered that with that 200 and the other money he had as he started his game, that he could buy properties, and he could do things, and he could be a landowner if he wanted. It was up to him what he did with his money every time he passed go. A couple of times he noticed that I was in real trouble in the game, and he was going to bury me as I landed on Boardwalk again. But both of those times I missed Boardwalk, and what's the one after Boardwalk? It's Go. So instead of having to pay him an exorbitant amount, I was able to pick up 200 and continue for at least a while in the game. And do you know how I felt when I got that 200? Pretty good, because it kept me in the game and kept me going. So that's an 11-year-old concept of a basic income that I thought was pretty unique and interesting, and I want to reflect some more on that. And maybe at some time somebody will figure it out and get the amount right, because I'm not sure that 200 is the right amount. That was built in the 1940s, and I'm not sure. Maybe our economists can tell us what $200 of 1940 money would be in today's money. But the other thing we do when we play Monopoly, we don't use the ones. We just discard them, because we don't have pennies anymore, so we thought, well, maybe we don't even need the $1 bills, and they're kind of a troublesome thing when you're playing Monopoly. So if it's $6, we round down. If it's $9, we round up. But basic income is a pretty interesting concept, and I've been watching it for a little while now, and see it as a top-up, something that pays for the basics. It's not something so that you can live well. People will not stop working, I don't believe, if they get a basic income, because if you were to stop working, then you would lose all those other things that you need, like car, transportation, television, leisure, vacation, and so on, if you don't have a basic, if you stopped work because you had a basic income. So for me, it's not meant to replace other forms of income. It's meant to get you to the basics, and then other income would top you up beyond, so you can do other things. And I believe it's meant to ensure that all Canadians have dignity and are able to pay for basics. I was thinking the other day about homeless shelters, and we have some in the city that don't charge. We have some that do charge. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be good to walk into a homeless shelter if you needed that service for a moment, and because you have a basic income, to be able to pay for your night, even in a homeless shelter? That would be quite remarkable. Right now, there are people who live in homeless shelters who have absolutely nothing. So lots of reasons to have a basic income. And some people say, and you've probably heard it recently in the media, that people are talking about a $20,000 amount. I don't think the amount matters. I think what matters is that it's a grant for everyone, that it's universal. And to me, that's what's important about it, is that it's universal and that it's available for everyone. So I want to say a couple of other things, and I don't want to steal Lynn's thunder. She's going to talk about some experiments that have happened. But one of the big arguments is that it's a disincentive to work. And the experiments around the world have all proven that to be not true. When people get a basic income, they've finally got a start. They can now move on and beyond. There's a fellow named Charles Corrales. Some of you may know his work, The Persistence of Poverty. And what he says in there is being poor and not having adequate money is like having enough ointment in your cupboard for a bee sting. And what do you do when you get a bee sting? You go to the cupboard, you take out the ointment, you put it on, and you solve the problem. But what if you get 6 bee stings and you've got enough ointment for 1? If you spread it out, it doesn't work. If you put it on 1, you've still got the problem of 5. And he says things like poverty are like bee stings, and it's impossible to solve the problem with just that little bit of ointment. But a basic income, I think, could get you past that point where you could actually have enough so that you're not ever stuck. It does other things too for people who want to do creative things like become an artist and maybe paint in this park. And if you have a basic income, then you could actually do that, and you wouldn't be stuck trying to sweep floors somewhere just so you could survive. My wife's an artist, and she has me, so she doesn't need a basic income. But if she did have one, she wouldn't have to do things like drive a truck every once in a while to make some income. She could actually focus on her art. There's lots of reasons then, I think, for a basic income. I want to talk a little bit too, and I know who's giving us the flag for time. Are you doing that? Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about old age security. Old age security is the envy of the world because it's a basic income for people over 65 in this country. And I want to tell you a little story about that. There's a fellow I met in a homeless shelter in Calgary who turned 65 while he was in the shelter. And what do you think he did? He applied for old age security and a guaranteed income supplement, and he got it. Before that, he was never eligible for anything. He'd run out of EI and other things, I'm sure. And now, he's no longer in a homeless shelter. He was able to pool his money with another friend, and together they live in an apartment in Calgary, and they're doing just fine. So there's an example of a person who, once he got a basic income, was able to move on well and is actually doing better than he's ever done before. Before, when he picked bottles and was living in the shelter, he would use his money to buy alcohol. And he used to say, you know, I never have enough money for a down payment, but I can always collect enough for a case of beer. And now he's able to live well. He's using less alcohol. He's doing far better than he ever was before he had that basic income of old age security. So how much time do I have? I'm good? Okay. So a couple of other things that I wanted to mention is the projects that we know about that are around the world. Do you know where basic income projects are? Have you heard of some of them? We have them in Namibia, we have them in Brazil, we've got the old age security here, and we've had projects in other places around the world. There's a new one in India that I think you'll talk about, and that's very exciting. And one of the things that we've learned from all of the projects, wait till that motorcycle goes, one of the things we've learned from all of the projects is that the dignity that they've created for people have moved them all on well. I love some of the statistics around increased high school completion, reduced policing, reduced trips to emergency wards. And when you think of those things, think of the costs of those things compared to not having them. So you can put your money into a basic income, or you can put your money into caring for homeless people and in caring for low-income people who have to then use other systems. So for me, it's almost a no-brainer The economic arguments seem to be there for us to take. They surpass all of the other arguments. And for me, the only argument that you could have against basic income would be a moral one. I think maybe I should stop there and pass the microphone, and then we can do questions after.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Rook. I love the anecdote about Monopoly. That was fantastic. Your 11-year-old seems to have a pretty solid grasp on economics already. So following Dr. Rook, we're going to have City Councillor Jim Stevenson speaking. So Jim has been a successful businessman for over 35 years. He was elected to City Council in 2007, and at the end of this term, he will have been in office for 10 years. He's also a former member of numerous city committees in Calgary, including land use planning, the Peter Lougheed Hospital expansion, the Northeast LRT extension, and roadway development. He can offer an insight into the question of guaranteed annual income from someone who's been largely involved in both the private and public sectors.
Thank you. Well, it's really a pleasure and honor for me to be here. I feel totally out of place sitting here with these well-educated people. I have a grade 10 education, so I'm going to have to be careful that I don't use too big of words for these people here, but I'll do my best. Just to give you a little bit of my background, it might help you to understand a little bit as to why I'm totally against this. To me, it's a no-brainer to turn this idea down, but Dr. Rook said to me before, how can you possibly be against it? I said, by the time I get finished, I'll have converted both of these people, right? So, anyway, I was born and raised on a farm in southwestern Ontario. My father was an alcoholic, and he died when I was 15, an alcoholic, and we lived in poverty. We did not have a running water or an inside toilet or anything like that. And my dad was very violent. I seen him beat my mom on many, many occasions. So when he died, I just sighed a sigh of relief and I said, thank God he's gone. No more fights. I understand now that he had a sickness, that he needed help. But my situation was that I was ashamed, totally ashamed of my family's situation. I always felt that everyone was looking at me and saying, he's from that family that can't afford to put food on the table. There was no welfare in those days. If there had been, I guess we'd have been on it. But we did have neighbors and friends who gave us hand-me-down clothes and so on. After my dad died, my mom married another alcoholic and also living in poverty. So at my second month in grade 11, I was basically forced to quit school and go and make some money to help pay because they couldn't even keep me in school. Now here's where the turning point came for me to a degree, because I had a chance at that point. I turned 17 in December, and in January I had two offers. The one offer was to take a job as a construction laborer, and the pay was going to be $1.75 an hour. I also had the opportunity to take an apprenticeship, and the apprenticeship was for a construction millwright, and the pay was $1.26 an hour. Now I decided to take the job on the apprenticeship, and the reason why I did was because I felt once I got a trade, I'd be able to go somewhere where with the laborer's income that I couldn't really climb up the economic staircase. And I call it the economic staircase today, and I'll explain to you why I call it that. But at the time, it just seemed to make sense to me to take the lesser wages to be able to get myself into a better position. I did that. I became a journeyman millwright. I was working regularly and making very good money. And I got involved in the union. I became a full-time union rep in my 20s. I worked for 2 years as a full-time business agent for our union. And I got involved from there in the NDP. And I got involved, I ran in the 71 provincial election in Ontario as an NDPer. I ran against the Conservative Minister of Revenue. What an experience that was. But one of the things was in my platform was a guaranteed annual wage back in 1971. We talked about it, and of course, I knew Stephen Lewis very well and his father David and Tommy Douglas. I drove him around the country, and I believed that these guys were some of the smartest people I knew, and that the things that they were promoting had to be right, it had to be real. But then I started to read, I started to understand more. I became a supervisor in construction, started to work more and understand the company side of it. And I started to realize that some of these principles were not what made the economy turn. And I became then, over the years, I became quite an entrepreneur, started my own business, and I read a lot of books on self-help and understanding how you actually make a living for yourself. I came to Calgary in 1979. I brought my wife and family out here. We'd never moved west before. We'd never even been west. We arrived here in 79 with everything that we had left in a U-Haul truck, and we started a business here in Calgary, and I've been here ever since. I got involved in a lot of community work, and then I ran in 2007 and was elected to City Council. The reason why I was asked to come here today was because someone saw some of the quotes that I made, because we had a debate in council back a few years ago about something called a living wage. And I argued against the living wage, and we were successful at getting that defeated in City Council. And the reason why I think that's so important, I think that the living wage, the same as this guaranteed annual income, actually hurts the very people that we want to help. When I said about the fact that I took that job for $1.26 an hour, it put me on a step of the economic staircase that I could climb up that ladder. If we were to put a guaranteed annual wage or a guaranteed $13.50 an hour, like is what the proposal was for a living wage, what that does is it cuts off the steps of the economic ladder below there. And it's necessary sometimes for a person to be able to qualify to actually earn $13.50, to develop the life skills that they need. Sometimes they need to get started at $11 an hour in order to get there. But if you cut off those bottom layers of that economic ladder, what you're really saying is the people that aren't qualified and are not able to deliver to the marketplace a value that someone will pay as a business, you're saying they're unemployable. You can't employ those people. And so I would not be in favor of us doing that. I would be in favor of us putting money into a program that teaches people the basic life skills, because people need to, a lot of people are in a position where they would like to earn better money, but they don't know some of the simple things like hygiene. They don't know about proper dress. They don't know about responsibility to show up on time when they've got a job. They don't know about handling their own money. Those are the skills that we need to teach these people so that they can climb up this economic staircase, because I don't think anyone, if we were to put it at $2,000 a month, I don't think anybody wants to live on $2,000 a month for the rest of their life. That's not a living, that's eking out an existence. But in order for them to be able to climb up that staircase and develop more skills, to get a better job, to seek a better opportunity, they have to at least get a start. And so I think what we would be doing here with this is the same thing as with the living wage. We'd be taking away the opportunity for people to actually climb that staircase. So I'm prepared to go into, I didn't have anything prepared today. I just came here. I came back from vacation at 11:30 today and rushed down here, and I hadn't any idea whether I was going to be asked to speak or answer questions or what. But I'd be prepared to get into a debate at some point here. But at this point, I would just like to let this go and hear from the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stevenson. You're right, that was a very compelling argument. The next speaker that we have is pro-guaranteed annual income. Her name is Dr. Lynn McIntyre, and she's a professor in the Department of Community Health Sciences of the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Calgary. She's currently also the Associate Scientific Director for the Institute for Public Health and Chair of the Canadian Public Health Association. Dr. McIntyre holds both a medical degree and a master's degree in community health and epidemiology from the University of Toronto. She is a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians of Canada in Public Health and Preventative Medicine. Dr. McIntyre co-authored a University of Calgary School of Public Policy research paper entitled How a Guaranteed Annual Income Could Put Food Banks Out of Business. So give it up for Dr. Lynn McIntyre.
Thanks a lot, and thanks so much for the audience. So sometimes the big idea, as Gabor said, is required to solve a big problem. So I want to start out talking about the big problem that we're trying to solve with guaranteed annual income. So we've been already hearing about persistent poverty, chronic poverty. There's also the concept of the precarity, those that live in precarious situations, from day labor to seasonal work. And this is a class of population that even the head of the World Health Organization at the recent assembly of the WHO just a couple of months ago talked about industrialized nations as creating an entire underclass of the precarity. And so these are perhaps these noble individuals that we're supposed to be having move forward as they learn to take some responsibility. But we've actually been able to create public policy debate about whether or not they should be foreign and bring them in for the precarious work, or whether or not we should be displacing our foreign workers in order to have our own Canadians work in their precarity. My work is in the area of food insecurity, which is the lack of access to adequate food because of financial constraints. So it's akin to poverty, but it's actually a really grinding poverty that actually saps your humanity and your dignity, because it means that you're at the very least worried about where your next meal comes from, to answering questions about going a whole day without eating, or sometimes 2 days. So we have a real problem with food insecurity, representing about 1 in 8 households in Canada. We also have in Canada, United States, and of course the OECD, this new, very, very persistent problem of youth unemployment, even educated youth not being able to get their start. So, and we're also seeing with the potential of bringing the actual decision to make our guaranteed annual income for seniors move to age 67, we're going to be seeing a reversal in our very successful alleviation of poverty of seniors, and adding 2 more years of misery to the fellow that John talked about, but many, many other hidden individuals. So that is the big problem that we have. And so that we can add to that something that hasn't been mentioned, is that we have something that's caused demonstrations. The 1%, the Occupy New More, the notion of income inequality. And these are actually very strongly related, as I'll be showing you. So it's not only the 1%, but the 0.1% are farther away than the 1% than the 1% are to the very lowest stratum of society. So this very large income inequality, this very large group of the precarity, is calling out for a big solution, a new idea. And that idea is guaranteed annual income. So why are our current solutions not working? And we have buckets. I just spent some time in Edmonton 2 days ago learning about 72 low-income drug plans for this group, that group, this group, that group, this group, that group. So we have got buckets of social programs for those that are in need. They're very difficult to navigate, but if they're overused, if they actually get accessed, like our emergency departments, we immediately call it abuse, right? So if your caseloads are ridiculously high, as they are in income supports, where you don't even ever get a face-to-face meeting with your caseworker in our modern welfare system, then it's because of abuse. So we have this social welfare programs that are supposed to take care of those who really need it, but as soon as they're taken up, that's because of abuse. And that's as true for the waiting rooms as it is for unemployment of seasonal workers, as well as income supports. So the only free program that we really are sort of still agreeing with as a social program is health. And that's where we're actually it's costing us a lot of money not to have a guaranteed annual income. And that's where we're also constantly charging with perhaps there's abuse in the system. We have two new kinds of evidences from our last and most recent recession about the problems of not considering a basic income solution. So I just want to briefly mention a book called The Body Economic, and this is David Stuckler and his colleague in the United Kingdom, who looked at the recession, the 2008 recession, and looked at countries like Iceland compared to Italy, and looked at what we call the austerity programs, cut, 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 we can't afford anything, and those that were stimulus programs. And the subtitle of the book is Why Austerity Kills. It has a direct relationship to health. It has a direct relationship to suicide and to complete despair. So the most successful turnaround countries from Iceland on are those that actually did stimulus, including the United States of America, which you wouldn't have thought would be a stimulus country, but of course it had to in order to recover, and it's done quite well. The other body of literature that's now making us think about what is it we're going to have to rethink is Thomas Piketty, what a great name, who's been able to write a treatise of over 650 pages that people are reading as if it were Harry Potter, because it's a compelling case around capital and capitalism and why the whole system is bound to fail. And that's when we come back to this issue of floor and ceiling. One of the interesting conversations I heard at this basic income conference that was just held as an international meeting last month in Montreal was about Thomas Jefferson and Robespierre, two Republicans with very different impressions that we have in terms of history, but they both had a shared understanding of an income floor, that we needed to take our masses of those that were basically serfs and bring them up to a certain level of dignity, and ceiling, that this great monarch and other types of the elite had to be controlled in some way. So the basic income actually does both, because yes, indeed, you must take taxes from the rich and redistribute them down to be able to afford a basic income. Not that it's not hugely cost-saving, as I'll mention in a second, but that's how you do it. So you solve the problems of income inequality at the extreme, and we're not talking about a communist level, we're talking about let's be reasonable. Let's go back to 1975 when Canada had the lowest Gini coefficient, was a measure of income inequality. Or why don't we just look like Alaska right now, which is the lowest Gini coefficient in the entire North American continent, and we don't hardly think of them as a commie state. So that's what we do with our big problem, with now I'm saying two problems, and the failure of conventional solutions. The other thing is that inaction is not an option. Inaction looks like 1 in 18 US males is incarcerated. Okay? If you actually create enough of an underclass, then you will have to create the means by which they can survive, and the only way to stop them is coercion. So this is another huge U.S. movement called prison reform, because it's simply not working. So GEI is a basic, as basic income is a big idea. The definition I want to just repeat from what John said. It is unconditional. Whether you're a good guy, bad guy, lazy guy, up-and-coming guy, it's unconditional. It's blind to who you are, in fact. It's universal. It is your entitlement as a citizen, as a member of humanity. It is individual. So it means that in India, these studies that I'll be mentioning briefly, the rich families, the women had no money either, and they got a basic income, and it completely changed their lives, even from wealthy families. It's individual. And it meets the basic need. It is hardly the ability to buy your RV and go and visit California for a month. $15,700, which is approximately what our basic income is for seniors. And there's no work requirement. So I do think the basic income appeals to right, left, and green. It appeals to the right because it's simple. It's non-bureaucratic. It actually permits risk-taking. If you can't survive easily, you can't dream, you can't risk. And the MINCOM experiment, which was the 1970s experiment of basic income in Manitoba that was rediscovered, I think people have heard the story. One of the wonderful findings, besides high school education completion, people with 2 jobs having 1 job, is that like really bad to spend more time with family, was that people could take a risk. And you know what? It was really not well taken up. People did not have to even use the basic income because it was insurance that was there, but they always knew that if they actually did a small venture, they would also be able to have something to fall back on. The new experiments, and the one I heard about from India is fantastic. So it's basically 8 villages randomized to basic income, man, woman, and child. Children got 50% of adults. It means that the disabled got purchasing power, and it totally changed the care that they received and their ability to command respect and resources, compared to the 8 sort of working away. And what we saw there, which is unique perhaps to many basic income experiments, is pooling. That people would get together and 5 families would build a latrine, or I've heard about roofing, or that you could actually buy a goat or buy some shared animals. You could actually share with your partners. I think when John was talking about his homeless man, he now lives with a buddy. That's again a pooling situation. It actually encourages collectivity because you have something to bring to the table. So that, and I would suggest the right likes that. The Greens like this. This is sustainable. This is humanity that's sustainable. It's sustainable because, again, it creates this through the income cycle of constantly reinvesting in people's capacity so they can, in fact, truly express their capacity. And it's about building institutions and building a long-term horizon. And the left, of course, likes this because it's redistributive. It's just. It provides dignity for all. And it also has a very centrist view. There are 3 political parties, NDP, Green, and Liberal, that all have basic income resolutions as part of their approved policy convention at the federal level, which is great because we do want them to pay for it so the province of Alberta can do its own thing. The other thing that's a benefit is I've basically mentioned when you have basic income and it's through the tax system, which it has to be, then you end up having a reduction of your income inequality, and that helps all. So the interesting thing about income inequality is, yes, the rich do much better than every other group below, but they never do as well in an unequal society as the rich-er in an equal society. The Swedish rich in a more egalitarian society beat the pants off of health in any way you measure it than someplace like the United States or someplace like the United Kingdom. So it's good for all. It's called leveling up. We have the bureaucracy in place for guaranteed income. We already have a tax system that is able to fine 65-year-olds. Just basically give everybody a birthday card or something, and they'd be also found as if they were 65 in our tax system. So it's very, very doable. Our good case workers would not be out of work. Instead of spending all your social work time looking for financial resources, they'd be able to do what they're trained to do. So that's the same with all the other social service groups. It's not going to be a massive, massive layoff. The police could be doing positive policing instead of this, picking up fellas that are roughing it in the parks. And my final sort of set of points is my own research and others across have shown what we call a 50% gain. So when my colleagues and I looked at low-income single adults aged 60 to 64, their food insecurity rate was 22%. 1 in 5 did not have enough food to make it. When they turned 65, the group 65 to 69, the food insecurity rate, that's all they got was their, at that time, 14.7, was 11%, 50% reduction. The Newfoundland and Labrador Poverty Reduction Initiative has been ongoing for a few years. It has gone from the highest rates of food insecurity to 50% reduction in food insecurity among their social assistance recipients, absolutely invisibly. There was no social program, caseworkers, capacity building, education, brochures, apprenticeships. It was basic income, and food insecurity is the pathway to health. A recent study that has looked at people who are food insecure, mild, moderate, or severe, and their health expenditures, severely food insecure people, general population, all in, twice the expense for healthcare resources in a single year than those that are not. 50%. Take So taking the pause of the motorcycle. So my very last concluding comment is the biggest estimate is really 30 billion a year, right? 23 billion is easily found as a savings overnight just by doing a little bit of back of the envelope in terms of policing and health, completion of school, potential earnings, small, medium enterprise growth, etc. So this is actually going to be almost cash neutral. If not 7 billion, that's really not, if that's all we have to worry about to be able to change our society, it doesn't seem as if it's insufficient. And I think I just want to echo, we're going to hear probably more and more about how this is a work disincentive. And I keep on saying, are you guys kidding? I mean, you want people to be able to work in the most menial of jobs, and, to displace foreign workers. It's this back to the precarity. This is not a work disincentive. None of the studies have shown, so I want to repeat that. But it is around moving forward in one's work and in one's life, and not only in the gainful employment, but in all aspects of life. So I certainly am, as you can see, a proponent of this big idea for the big problems that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. McIntyre. That was very eloquent and well put, and a pleasure to listen to. So our final speaker today is going to be Dr. Christopher Bruce. Dr. Christopher Bruce has been a professor of economics at the University of Calgary for over 40 years. His teaching and research interests include labor economics, economics of collective bargaining, and economic analysis of law. He has a PhD from Cambridge University, has written 5 books, edited 3 others, and published numerous articles in academic journals. So here's Dr. Bruce.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'll stand. I need to pace off my energy. So I would like to look at the practicalities rather than the moral, philosophical issues. And first, let me start. The question is a guaranteed income going to solve poverty? So the first thing we need to know is what constitutes poverty? At what level of income are we going to assume you came out of poverty? And a standard measure in Canada that's accepted quite widely is half of the average income. So average income per person in Canada is about $50,000. So what we need then is $25,000 is kind of a fairly well accepted poverty line. Okay. So what we're talking about here, it seems to me, is we need to have a system that will guarantee that people make at least $25,000 a year. And a couple of the speakers have mentioned $2,000 a month. That's pretty close to $25,000. So let's use $2,000 a month. So what I want to ask is, where's that money going to come from? I'm going to mention 3 different kinds of approaches. 2 of them are being used already in Canada in various methods, and one was what the last speaker mentioned, but there's been a number of experiments. So let's start with a very simple method of making sure everybody makes $25,000 a year. We'll just write a check to everybody for $25,000 and send it to them. Well, these days we don't need to write a check, we'll just put it in their bank account electronically. The government will just put $2,000 in your account every month. Then we'll know that everybody has at least $25,000. That's one approach. Okay, what's the problem with that approach? Well, take a very simple case. So $25,000 we're saying is half of what the average person earns. So that means how much the average person is going to have to contribute $25,000 to this program. Right? If $25,000 is half of the average, it must mean that everybody on average is contributing half of their income. So what's going to happen right away? The income tax is going to have to be 50% on your income if you're making $50,000 a year, because you're contributing $25,000. You're going to get it back, but your tax rate is going to be 50% just to pay for this program. On top of that, you're going to have to pay the normal taxes you're already paying, which is about 20%. So this program requires that the average person is going to have an income tax of 70%. Then they're going to get back $25,000 in this free money. What are the effects of that? Well, the first is we're pretty clear that you have a tax of 70% on your income, on your wages, that's really going to discourage people from working. Not discourage in the sense they're going to quit their jobs tomorrow because you've got to make something. But certainly people will... How do I stand back here?
It's actually, you're too close to it. And that's not right.
Okay, how do I go? This is... Technology is too much for me. I'll just stand here. Poor people around here are not going to have to see. Okay, so the first thing is, it's the amount of taxes required is going to be, it's going to have a definite discouraging effect on people's willingness to work. And the fact that we're getting $25,000 for free also has a discouraging effect. We know that if people receive lump sum monies, they work less, we stay home, look after our kids, we retire early, so it's definitely going to have a discouraging effect. But the main disadvantage of this guaranteed annual income program, where everybody just gets $25,000, is the cost. But we know that people are voting for parties that promise them lower taxes. This program offers you not just higher taxes, but extremely higher taxes. We're going to add 10 to 20% to your taxes. It's just not going to fly. Nobody's going to vote for this, sorry. So on a practical sense, whether you like it morally or not, it's not going to work. So wouldn't a better way be to just give money to the people who don't have money rather than give money to everybody? Why send a check for $2,000 to everybody? Why should we send it to you? You guys are all making lots of money already. Why don't we just send money to people who don't have money? So if you don't have any money, we'll give you $2,000 a month. Then you'll have $24,000 a year. Okay? What if you're making $10,000? We'll top you up to $25,000. We'll give you $15,000. If you're making $20,000, we'll give you $5,000. Does that sound like a good policy? It's a lot cheaper. We're only going to give money to the people that really need it. This is called welfare. And notice how it works. If you're making nothing, we give you $25,000. If you're making $10,000, we give you $15,000. So you worked and made $10,000, and you end up with $25,000 still. Right? Because you got nothing, we'll give you $25,000. If you make $10,000, we'll give you $15,000. You still have $25,000. If you make $20,000, we'll give you $5,000. You still have $25,000. No matter, so you start from zero and you start making money, we take it away the welfare. So from an income of zero to an income of $25,000, you've made no gain at all by working under a scheme where they top you up to be $25,000. This is what welfare programs do in Canada. If you're a single mother, you get something like $1,500 a month, but if you make any money, they reduce the $1,500 by the amount you made. What happens? Single mothers have no incentive to work. Right? If I go out to work, I don't get any more income because they take away my welfare. So they don't go to work. It's quite clear. Okay, so a system where I just take away money, essentially it's a 100% tax. If you earn $10,000, they take away $10,000 from your guaranteed income. So that doesn't work either. So the system that has become more popular is we'll just take away, say, half of what you earn. So if you earn $10,000, instead of taking away $10,000 from the guaranteed income, we'll take away $5,000. But that's like a tax rate of 50%. So what we're going to do is we're going to tax you 50% of your income by every time you make money, we'll reduce your guaranteed annual income payments by 50%. Where's the money come from for this program? It's going to have to come from higher taxes to everybody. So we're going to pick the people that are at the low end are going to have a 50% tax rate. People at higher are going to have much higher taxes than they had before. Again, it's the programs that have been experiments have just looked at one little town, like Dauphin, Manitoba. They did this program in Dauphin. Where'd the money come from? This came from general revenue. But if we're in a real world where everybody gets the money has to come from somewhere. It has to come from the people in that country. I just don't think that, so from a very practical point of view, there's just not enough money out there, and people are just not willing to pay the taxes that are going to support it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bruce. Some really interesting points there. I'm going to pass the mic over to Aaliyah for 1 sec.
Sorry, folks. Emergency, no, not really. Just want everyone to know it is starting to rain. If it starts to pick up a little bit,
We're not worried about the chairs. They'll survive, so don't worry about those. We will be grabbing our equipment up onto the stage, though, so we apologize in advance if we have a sudden end to the program, just so you know. I apologize for interrupting.
Like, where did this even come from? Anyways, I'd like to ask the speakers, does anybody want to make any rebuttals to any of the points that were made? Would somebody like to? I'm going to pass the mic over to Jim Stevenson.
It's me.
We told him earlier that when he started to speak, the sky would open up, right? So I think that's what started to happen here. Yeah, sorry. I don't know, maybe I'm having a problem with my math, but it figures out if we have 15 million adults in Canada and we give them all $2,000 a month, doesn't that come out to $30,000 or $30 billion a month, not a year? Or did I do my math wrong? Anyway, that's maybe with a grade 10 education I can't add, but that's what it comes out to me. If we're doing it for a year, 30 billion a year, that works out to less than $200 a month for the individual. But my whole point is this: you cannot get the caboose to catch up with the engine by stopping the engine. You stop the engine and the whole train stops. And so if we're going to put this kind of a load on the people who are making money, an unbelievable load on those people, what you do is you totally discourage enterprise, you totally discourage job creation. So I won't say anything more than that. Thank you.
So the number of 30 billion has been well studied as a $30 billion a year. That's because there's going to be a huge number of people that don't even go into the merry-go-round of getting any money and having it 100% clawed back. So we are talking about individuals that are at the lower, that are going to be able to recoup this. What does that look like? The GST went from 7% to 5%. And that produced, I think, $7 billion. It went into consumers' pockets. That's what would be 1/3 or 1/4, 1/4 of a guaranteed annual income for Canada. So these are the kinds of numbers that are, and nobody thought that was, was a very, very, arduous. 7 billion substantial, yes, it is. But so that's what I'm saying. So just something as minor as the GST going from 7 to 5. If it went back up to 7, we'd have $7 billion to be able to put into this 30 billion that's required on an annual basis. Without this war, this fear mongering around taxes and around the others. And nobody's been saying $25. People have been saying very similar to this 15.7. Speaker's Corner, yes. 15.7 that we're actually already seeing now.
Thank you so much, everybody. Would anybody in the audience like to come up? Merle, please, I invite you to come up and speak. Before it rains.
Actually, a couple of points. I, like Jim, was actually a young socialist when I was about 17, so I've seen both sides of the comic. And I want to just share a few things. One, practicality, and one, what's happening here in Calgary. First of all, I think, as the other speaker said, that no one is going to vote for such a drastic increase in taxes in this country. It's simply not going to happen. It's why Harper was re-elected, because he promised a lesser tax, i.e. the drop in the GST. But what does it really mean when we start talking about giving something to someone for nothing? And our speaker here, the lady spoke, well, we're not talking about communism. Well, actually, my friend, that is actually exactly what you're talking about. I have been to Cuba. I've been there several times. There was actually a brilliant article recently in the National Post talking about the workforce in Cuba. A doctor makes less in Cuba than someone does for the city of Calgary sweeping the streets. In fact, they have so many doctors in Cuba, they send them to Venezuela and exchange them for oil. The average Cuban waiter makes about $3 a month. And see, when you start talking about an economy where you're going to force a whole bunch of people into a job, of state jobs, the income is going to go down. It's guaranteed. The state cannot simply afford to have 10 million people on their payroll and pay them the type of money that they're being paid in North America. That's why young women in Cuba are prostituting themselves. Mothers of 3 children are in the streets of Havana selling their bodies to foreigners because they need a little bit more money to pay the bills. And every time I hear from the left, we have a new idea. This is something new and big. It's not new. It's not big. It's the same old idea of forcing the economy into capitalism, and it doesn't work. It's been proven. The average Soviet that you talked to when I was in there in 1990, they hated their job, they hated the state, they hated the Communist Party, all because they had no drive to be able to do anything better for themselves. And as far as here in Calgary is concerned, I come up this way from work many times, and it's often I see a couple of kids sitting there with a little sign that says, "Traveling across Canada needs some funds." I don't know, when I was young, I never packed my suitcase and decided to go from Toronto to Alberta with no money in my pocket. And I quite frankly find it insulting that I have worked all day long and I gotta come by these 2 guys with their dreadlocks and their dope and their beer cans sitting on the grass so I can help sponsor his little trip across Canada. And I looked at him, I said, I got a 3-word answer for you, my friend, to go across Canada. It's spelled J-O-B. Get one, get off your ass, then travel across Canada. And he was quite insulted about that idea. No, I'd rather sit here and drink beer on the grass with my dog. I don't know how he feeds his dog. Drink beer, smoke dope, and bother patrons going up and down the street. You want to see real poverty, where people are actually hungry, go to places like Nicaragua, the streets of some places in Mexico, El Salvador, where they're actually really don't have the food. And it is not true to say that homeless people in this city are starving. They can get up to 5 free meals a day. I've served the meals in this city for free. Most of the people on the street in Calgary, excluding these young people sitting drinking and smoking dope, there's 3 things going on. They have alcohol dependence problems, drug dependence, which is the reason they can't go to the shelters. You can't go to the shelter if you're drinking booze or smoking dope. And they refuse to get help for their addictions, so they stay on the street. I've seen some of these guys going up and down 17th Ave. They look perfectly healthy outside of their alcoholic problem. And we cannot force people to get help. If you do not realize and think that you have a problem, the state cannot force you to get that help. So, you really need to look at countries where people really are starving for food before you start saying that people that are sitting there on the grass or having this problem with alcoholism are the ones that my taxes have to pay for. I work hard all day long, 8 hours a day. And I make an average wage. And I'm firmly against just handing out money to someone that, it has never worked in that area.
Thanks, Bro. Would anybody else in the audience like to come up and say anything? That's okay. And speakers, would anybody like to say anything? Okay. I think we're going to wrap it up then, get everybody out of the rain. Thank you so much, everybody who's still here. Thanks for coming. Thank you so much, speakers. Dr. Bruce, would you like to say something?
I'm just going to say this is not a socialist idea. It came from Milton Friedman, who is a very right-wing economist.
Okay. There we go. And on that note, thank you so much, speakers. One more.
Let me say one thing. Just so you know, the drop-in center, as an example, costs us $25 million a year. So if you could solve that problem, then that money can be used in other places. So to me, welfare and all of the social money that we use, I think quite inappropriately sometimes, can be directed to a basic income. It would solve a whole bunch of things.
Awesome. Thank you so much, you guys. You've really shed some light on a lot of the issues and the possibilities, and we appreciate you all coming out to talk. And thank you guys all so much for coming out and Speaker's Corner.
Yes, I think.